bottom of the rank and file. So human nature is difficult to deal with sometimes, but we shouldn't be surprised. We should recognize that we have to speak clearly and try to persuade people, and then we have to organize so that the power of the people is brought to bear, because ultimately that's the only thing that those at the State House fear. It's when they are getting so many phone calls and so many letters and so many people coming in demanding attention. It works, but you have to have a lot of people who recognize what's wrong and demand that it be made right.
In your earlier career, before coming to Rhode Island, you were a minister, I believe, of the United Methodist Church?
Right.
Talk to us about your days as you self-define yourself as an activist minister and what that taught you before coming to Rhode Island.
I'm a product of the civil rights movement, and I have been committed to those who are poor, particularly in the cities. And so but I went to seminary in the 60s and was involved in trying to get the Federal Voting Rights Act and Federal Civil Rights Acts passed in 1964, 65 and 64. And then I wound up working in some tough neighborhoods in New York City and dealing with people who were shut out of the system and who had no power and who sometimes were beaten up by the police. And so I had to get involved in those things. And as I spoke out, I found that people in the head of the police department said it didn't happen. We arrested him, but there's the stories. They're new stories, but they're old stories. They're the kind of stories we've been seeing out of Ferguson and out of Charleston and places where people of color have been mistreated by the police and unfairly charged. And that seems not to have gone away. But I saw those things, and I saw the struggle when I would go into the establishment, for instance, to try to get some affordable housing built. And one of my first experiences was running to a guy who had to sign off on the plans. And he kept asking for little changes. And I finally said to the architect, "What's going on?" And he said he wants a bribe. He'll never ask for it. But until we offer it, the plans are not going to get approved. And I said, "How much?" And he said 5% of the architect's commission. When I got to Rhode Island, I found out that the price tag for pay-to-play in the DePrete administration was 5% of the project cost, not 5% of the architect's commission.
Wow.
But after a while, you begin to recognize that when people are in power, they have opportunities to steer contracts, to direct jobs to certain people, to favor certain and disfavor other people. And when that starts to happen, then all of the public gets bled. The taxpayers get bled, but ordinary people get bled, and those who should be getting services from government are shortchanged.
So, given your history, coming up in the civil rights movement, working on the Voting Rights Act, the recent kind of excision of certain key provisions from the Voting Rights Act it must really stick in your craw that this has happened, considering the fight that you've put in. And also, you mentioned we see these things happening in Ferguson, Charlestown. This is something you've been fighting your whole life. And did you see it? Has it been an ebb and flow? Did it go down for a little while and then come back up? Or do you think this has just kind of been a constant thing?
I think it's an ebb and flow, but I do think that the election of Barack Obama has stirred some deep reservoirs of racial hatred or racial ignorance in the United States. And so groups have begun to get riled up and maybe afraid of losing what they cherish. And so we're seeing more of this domestic racist stuff like Dylan Root.
Burning of black churches.
And walking in with a gun.
Yeah.
So these things are not, they're familiar to me. I'm not surprised at them. I keep thinking that we're moving ahead, but you referenced the excision by the United States Supreme Court of a key section of the preclearance section of the Voting Rights Act. And that's a tragedy because it was by 5-4. And this Supreme Court has, in a number of other key ways, in terms of campaign finance, broken down laws that have been in place to protect the people for decades, or in campaign finance case, a century.
Referring to Citizens United, McCutcheon.
Citizens United, McCutcheon, and so on. And they don't, it's troubling to see it. And I think you just have to take it and go forward and say, let's keep working. Maybe there will be some new appointments, and maybe even these judges will recognize some things and change. But it's tough.
Now, before you come to Rhode Island, you retire from the ministry.
I actually hadn't retired. My wife got the job as executive director of the Women's Center of Rhode Island.
Okay.
And I followed her, but I had a sense, I was 46, and I had a sense that I wasn't supposed to look for a church position. I could have had one. I mean, my credentials were perfectly in order. Mm-hmm. But I sensed that I was supposed to look for a secular job. I've always been uncomfortable with institutions that rely too much on income from the people that they are serving. In any event, so I tried out at the Providence Journal as a copy editor, and after 2 weeks I got canned. And I didn't know what I would do. And meanwhile, we'd run into a situation with a chimney on our house where we got slapped with a warning, and the neighbor said, well, just give an envelope to the building inspector and everything will go away. And of course that infuriated me because I knew what that was about. And so we went up, and my son and I fixed the chimney ourselves. And then ironically, there was the ad for Common Cause. And I thought I'd go there and I'd see, have a researcher and an office manager and computers. And of course there was nothing. The executive director had no staff, and the salary was $19,500. But I accepted.
What year was this?
This was 1988.
Okay.
And you were a member of the Common Cause much earlier in your career.
I had actually joined in 1970 when John Gardner first said everybody's organized but the people. And so I joined Common Cause then. I was at a meeting in Washington first week of June, and they were going around this room with the whole National Governing Board and staff, and it turned out I was the earliest one to join the organization of anybody in the room. It was wonderful. I loved it. But in any event, I joined, but my membership had lapsed. But then I saw this ad, and I said, I know what that's about. And so I submitted a resume, and I went, and of course the job description said you have to have a thorough knowledge of the history and government of Rhode Island. And I had neither of those because I was from Connecticut.
It's probably better off that you didn't.
But I got the job, and the very first thing that I was asked to do was to write an ethics complaint against Governor Ed DePrete. And some revelations had been in the paper by good investigative reporters. And fortunately, Ray Condon, who had been the director of the Conflict of Interest Commission for 10 years, was on the board, and she said, I'll be your tutor. I'll show you how to do this. You can do it, and you'll learn the ethics code in the process. And I did. And it took 3 years before DePrete was found to have steered contracts to large campaign contributors and to a crony of his, Jim Taft, from Cranston. And then came the RISD crisis. So it was like I was learning first executive branch corruption, then legislative corruption in RISD, which was the legislature up to its neck, and then later the judicial corruption, and then finally the separation of powers. So it was a great learning experience for me.
Before the break, we've only got a minute or so before the break, but I'd like you to talk about the influence of Archibald Cox on your career.
Yes. Well, of course, I had admired him from afar.
And jump in for a second. Explain to some of our younger listeners who Archibald Cox was.
When Richard Nixon condoned the Watergate break-in, there was a struggle about how he would be prosecuted. And there was an agreement with Congress and the president. And it was interesting. It was a bipartisan agreement. The Republicans and Democrats both agreed something wrong had happened. They appointed Archibald Cox. He was a Harvard law professor. He only accepted it with the proviso that he could follow the evidence wherever it went. I don't want to run into your break, though. Am I?
No, keep going.
Okay. So he came here on the 20th anniversary and spoke to a group at Bristol Harbor about what happened, because once they recognized that tapes had been made in the Oval Office, that they should subpoena those. And he said to people, how do you subpoena the President of the United States? Who do you take to the White House door? The Marines? The President has the Secret Service. Anyway, Archibald Cox was the national chairman of Common Cause when I started. And he, before we could submit this complaint against Edward DePreet, the governor of Rhode Island, I had to send the draft by express mail to Washington. Archie Cox read it, made a few comments about it, sent it back, and said, go ahead and file it. But he was a wonderful guy who died a few years ago.
Excellent. You know, do you still have that manuscript?
Of the text?
Yeah.
Probably somewhere.
That it would be something worth saying. You are listening to the Reverend Phil West, retired Executive Director of Common Cause of Rhode Island. And, of course, you're listening to him on the Worldwide Coalition Radio Network at coalitionradio.us, on the Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. We blog, we write, we stream. It's all there. Again, new blog post this week from our favorite architect, David Broussard, architectural writer, and, of course, the incomparable Bella Robinson. We'll be right back.
Need a vacation but don't have the funds? Don't worry yourselves. Just stop by Halfway Tree Authentic Jamaican Cuisine for a quick trip to the islands. Enjoy some authentic Jamaican food from Halfway Tree, named Best of Rhode Island by Rhode Island Monthly Magazine. Plus, every Saturday, it's New England's #1 weekly Caribbean party with Paul Michael. Halfway Tree is located in downtown Providence at 150 Chestnut Street. Visit us online at halfwaytreeri.com. Halfway Tree is Rhode Island's leading source for authentic Jamaican food and vibes.
Superstar Vapor Pens have arrived. These 3-in-1 vapes come equipped with dry liquid atomizers, which allow them to vaporize a variety of blends, such as e-liquids, dry herbs, and CBD oils. The unit is rechargeable from any outlet, computer, or vehicle. Whatever your smoking pleasure, visit superstarvaporpens.com to see the latest products, e-liquids, and special offers. Become a premium e-liquid club member and get discounts, free shipping, and exclusive access to new products. Get the best. Superstar Vapor Pens. superstarvaporpens.com, or find them on Facebook and Twitter.
Beacon Shipping Logistics will ship any car, any vehicle, anywhere in the United States with door-to-door service. Just call 855-3-SHIP-IT. They ship vehicles for thousands of auto dealers throughout the country, so you know you can trust them to provide the most reliable auto transport in the industry. And they offer open or enclosed shipping for your precious cargo. Did you see a car online and can't get there? Let Beacon Shipping ship and deliver it right to your door. Need to get your boat from West Palm to Warwick Neck? Beacon can do it. Call Beacon Shipping Logistics for transporting one car to an entire fleet. Call 855-3-SHIP-IT or beaconshippinglogistics.com for service that shines. Let Beacon Shipping Logistics take the stress out of your life. Beacon Shipping Logistics provides the most honest auto transport service in the industry. Beacon Shipping Logistics, your one source for transporting one car or a whole fleet. Call 855-374-4748 for a free quote or beaconshippinglogistics.com.
And yes, we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage, porn-free, civilly disobedient. Still, in fact, I think we're going to put a reward out for someone who can find the First Amendment somewhere in the great city of Cranston, Rhode Island. Joining us today is, of course, the Reverend Phil West, retired Executive Director of Common Cause. You can find us on Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio and the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, where the events of the week are fully documented. Reverend West, welcome back to the Coalition.
Please call me Phil, Pat.
He's a devout Methodist. I don't think he has a choice.
Now listen, the kids on my street call me Phil, and they're like 7 years old.
11 years as an altar boy in the Catholic Church, raising my kids Methodist. It's great. You know.
The same way that, I run into my old teachers and they say, "Oh, please call me Bob," and no, you'll always be Mr. O'Brien.
I have to tell you, when Archibald Cox said, "Call me Archie," that was hard.
Yeah,
but it was an important thing for me to do.
Well, when somebody asks you and they prefer it that way, I think you kind of have to be obliged.
How's that,
to
Pat?
do it.
All right, Phil. All right, let's talk. Let's get right into it. Let's talk a little bit about the book. First of all, if you haven't seen it excerpted in the golocalproud.com, a great place to get a little bit of information on the book itself is, of course, the website secretsandscandals.com. You can find all about it. This book is a must read. I am about halfway through it. It is if you're a political person, or let's just say